Hello. I'd like to welcome to the Warden's drawing room today Canon Cosslett Quin, who was ordained in 1931 for the curacy of Dundela, County Down. He taught in St. Columba's from 1962 to 66. Professor of Biblical Greek and TCD, many travels in the Gaeltacht in the 30s, many word lists, and his notes from this period have been donated to the Academy. The canon's notes and manuscripts concern all areas of the Gaeltacht from Donegal to Kerry, and even as far as Rathlin Island, I believe.
Even as far?
As Rathlin Island, yes, I believe.
And East Ulster.
And East Ulster. Was there Irish spoken in East Ulster?
Omeath.
Oh, in Omeath. Oh, right, right.
And there was a little in Meath even.
Right.
I didn't hear any.
Was there any Irish spoken in Omeath at the time you were taking notes?
Oh yes. Yes, I learned Omeath Irish.
It's different from Southern Irish?
Oh, it's very soft.
Mm-hmm.
I could give you a specimen of it.
Okay, Heraglaf.
In Uy Hill Chregan, a huddle miss a rare fi vrog. This the hair in ammonia, and a gninja familien le prog. The grus grui vorhaki, agus linjer in a cave war or. Must be eklanche and dowan, the gawark, there in rian oig.
Wow, that's beautiful. Urchile Cragon.
Huh?
Urchile Cragon.
Yes.
Right.
It's a famous poem which is sometimes called a sort of the national anthem of that corner of the world.
Is that right?
East Ulster, yes.
Is that right? It's
I
very...
wrote to Mos Sofiach, the Roman Catholic primate, who's a great friend of ours. He used to sing it
regularly.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of research himself on that area, didn't he?
Yes, well, and of course in the continent too.
Right. That's going from Omeath. I'd like to bring you back maybe to a time before your adult life, to when you came to St. Columba's first, quite some time ago.
1920.
1920. Can you tell us the circumstances from why your parents chose St. Columba's?
Well, they sent me over and I tried for some scholarship in Oxford, but I couldn't get anything. I did get a small one in one college, but it was no good. So I had a bursary about £20 or so here. So they sent me here.
And you arrived a small boy?
Yes, it was late. There's an old lady was staying with us, I think, Mrs. Green. And she put me on this taxi for Columbus, and arrived about 2 or 3 days late, I think it was.
Right. And at the time, I mean, looking around you now, have there been many changes from that small boy coming on that first day?
Well, what I've seen so far is just the same. Practically every bit of it. Right. I suppose further along, there'll be a lot of other changes.
Right. Okay.
Classrooms and things. We had some rather temporary classrooms. They had a very sensible habit, what were called punishment drills. The sergeant, the old Sergeant Major Mangan, he used to march you around and make you do all sorts of unpleasant knees bends and things.
Right.
And it was very good for your exercise.
Right.
And at the same time, it was the old fellow. We had a man, he was the organist and the trainer of the choir. He was generally known as Guts.
Guts.
Guts. He had rather a lot of them, you see. And he used to slip around the place in carpet, and you'd never know. You'd find yourself down for a few punishment drills, and you say, "Oh, Guts must have seen me doing something out of the way." And
you wouldn't actually know.
You never knew
until your name went up on the list.
Yes.
Oh, that's...
And you see that then the master in duty whacked you, the people that were who had too many. However, that's another thing.
A long time ago. But as a small boy, and you arrived in the door, was it can you remember what your feelings were? Were they feelings of great anxiety?
I did have a good deal, but it wasn't too bad, I suppose.
It wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be?
No.
Right. Well, do you remember anything standing out in your years here?
Well, we used to wear gowns all the time, black gowns, and they were very useful, you know. They kept your clothes, and they were good as pen wipers and things.
Right.
And
still are.
You wore a surplice on holy days and Sundays, and mortarboard, I think it was only the masters had it.
Right.
Then there were senior prefects and junior prefects.
Did you ever rise to any of these exalted ranks? Were you ever a junior prefect?
Nothing of the kind.
You?
Not here at Campbell I was, you see. I went to Campbell afterwards.
Right. And so you were here for how long?
Just a couple of years.
Oh, right.
Then you see the troubles came.
Right.
And my people were afraid. Actually, I only got home with great difficulty. The rails were torn up and that sort of thing. Oh. And they thought they sent me to Campbell College, which was a jolly good place in its way too.
Right. Is it very different, Campbell to Columba's?
It was better in some ways and worse in others.
Could you maybe think of anything offhand?
Well, we had the most wonderful cubicles at Campbell. I think they've gone, but they were sort of bedrooms, you might say, wooden bedrooms.
Whereas you didn't have that privacy, perhaps, here?
Well, here you had a little partition, and you drew a curtain across, and then there was a prefect up at the end. He and his fag, or generally it was his relation, you see, or somebody, and he'd keep an eye on things. Now there's a master in the room at the end.
Oh, right. So in Campbell, the facilities in Campbell were perhaps maybe a little bit more salubrious than...
Yes, a wee bit.
Yeah. Right, okay. Are there any particular pictures in your mind when you think of your time here? Any pictures come to your mind about moments in chapel or out on the fields or friendship that you had?
Yes, well, I remember seeing the forecourts blowing up.
Really?
You heard the guns shooting, and then the IRA arrived. Some of them, well, they wanted surgical dressings and things, so the warden was quite glad to give them that.
Really?
And there was a fellow, I remember, in a dirty trench coat with a rifle over his shoulder. He was of the Republicans. And
they arrived in school?
Yeah.
During school time?
Yeah.
And did you get a good look at them?
Yes. Just in the front, you know. Yeah.
It must have caused quite a lot of excitement here in the school.
It was rather nervous. Yes, we felt rather nervous because we had an OTC, you see, and we used to drill with all sorts of queer things, you know, bits for bayonet practice and heavy things, and then very light bit, just the wooden part of the rifle. It was all very makeshift. And when we got then to England, you see, we'd fitted out with proper things.
And did you go every year to England on manoeuvres?
Just once from here. I went from Campbell. Well, Campbell had a very excellent band.
I see. Musical band.
Pipe band.
Oh, a pipe band. Right.
Bagpipes and all.
Oh, right.
And the drummer, I mean, they had very good drummers.
Right. Yes.
I mean, they didn't rat-a-tat, but they rolled.
Yes.
A proper drummer can roll.
Yes. That'll sound familiar to a lot of our young people here today. They're very interested in drumming too. Moving on, you mentioned you saw the forecourts going on fire. What was happening that evening?
It was the attack, you know, by what do you call them?
The irregulars, was it?
Yes. They attacked the forecourts and they blew it up.
Right. And what were you doing when you saw the fire?
I'd been at school.
Right. You were going from prep perhaps to somewhere else, and it was just accidental. Did it make a visible? Was it very visible?
Yes, indeed. It was just you could see it way down.
Very clearly.
Perfectly clearly.
That's a very strong memory to have. Okay. So from your life and from what I've heard, it appears that your greatest love has been Irish.
Well,
can you tell us perhaps where this came from?
I don't know. My father was an Orange man, but he was what I'd call a conscientious one. You know, he was always quoting one of the Orange things that an Orangeman should not insult or maltreat his Roman Catholic fellow countrymen,
right.
And that sort of thing, and that he should, of course, attend church, and that was Heavenly Father and that sort of thing. But my father, you see, grew up right on the border, and when he was a boy, the local schoolmaster had an Irish book, and he made an attempt to learn Irish.
All right.
But he only had Gajimar Tatu and Magalore.
It's a start.
As a start, which puzzled me because I'd been learning Munster Irish to start with.
Yes.
But anyway,
but your father was he had some interest in the language, maybe?
a wee bit. And you see, when I was at Trinity, I broke down, I lost my sleep, and I had to chuck working. And we went to the Isle of Man.
Right.
And I picked up a certain amount of Manx, which is a sort of broken down Irish. Ellen Vannin, you know, Ellen Vannin.
Mannan and MacLair.
Huh?
Mannan and MacLair? Is that Elon Vannin?
Yes, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mannan
And
my own dear Ellen Vannin with her green hills from the sea.
all right.
And I had a certain smattering of Irish at that time I picked up from books, and we met a colonel, Karl Marstrander, who was a great athlete, pole jumper. He was also a great scholar. He'd learnt Irish in the Blaskets, and he interested my father, you see, in the language.
I see.
Father sort of realised he came to the Isle of Man on a holiday, and he found that any speakers would die in the next year or two. So he had to stay, and he took down millions of words. But it's a weird place. They have it's a sort of broken down Gaelic, misspelt, phonetically spelt. And I went into one church where there are a lot of inscriptions in Manx, which I picked up, you see. And I got to know quite a lot of Manx. Ushig beg roy na morning do, crowd huddle to hen a rare. See, where did you sleep last night? And that sort of thing. And it's most surprising.
Is it more like Northern Irish?
It is fairly. It was actually said to be like County Louth. They had a good deal in common and understood each other.
That would make sense, all right.
One thing you see that is very important, in those days, of course, the country was much more open. And a friend of mine, Sean Pasker, he had some Irish. He was also a very great cyclist, and he got me to get a light bicycle. And in those days, you could go everywhere. And I'd think nothing of 100 miles in a day. I did round Loch Ness.
That's some cycle.
And I did from Glenties to from Ballycastle to Glenties, which is about most of 100 miles and all sorts of things.
Over hills.
Yeah.
Yes. So your travelling is not new to you.
And I used to come down to Omeath by the train, which was working then, get the ferry over to Omeath, and I'd meet quite a lot of the old people and talk to them, you see.
Right.
And then I explored other places in Tyrone and all over the place.
So the first great experience of Celtic languages was perhaps the Manx.
Yes.
And you went on from that to a deeper...
Then I went, you see, I was at Trinity about 1929, 30, and there was a friend who had picked up quite a lot of Irish in the Blaskets, so I said I'd go to the Blaskets. And it was a weird experience. I had to go out from Dingle, Tralee, Dingle.
From Dunquin?
Yeah, from Dunquin. And you went in a tiny little boat, and
you landed on the Trámhúr in the Blaskets?
Yes.
Right. So at that time in the Blaskets there was a lot going on, wasn't there?
Yeah,
there was a lot of interest.
About 100 people or so.
But there was a lot of interest in the culture, Tomás O'Criffin, Peg, people like that. Were you part of a group? Or did you go alone?
I went by myself.
With your trusty bicycle?
Yeah.
Right. And what was your reason for going to the island?
I wanted to learn the language.
Right. So did you stay on the island?
Yes. Stayed with a girl called Moira Gaheen, but her mother was a widow. Right. We kept in touch for years till she died. Right. I used to write.
She was related to Peg, I think, was she?
Yes. Cousin, I think.
So you stayed with Moira, and what time of the... Give me a picture of what time of the year
it was November. I arrived about... I stayed there. I thought I'd be there to the New Year, but I just got away on Christmas Eve.
Oh, right.
But I stayed about a week on the mainland, and then about 7 weeks on the island.
Right. So you sailed over from Cowminole, probably. Was it Cowminole over to the beach, and you stayed with Moira. And was it formal? Were you taking formal lessons, or?
Well, she taught me. We talked. I used to take a book and write down the words I heard, and pick it up that way.
So your daily, whilst you were there, when you got up in the morning, what used you do during the day on the island?
I'd have breakfast, and then I'd probably take a walk. You see, there's a Ceann Dubh at the other end. I walked as far as that once.
Right.
It was about 3 miles. But you went up a hill, and then there was an awful wind. Sometimes it would you nearly lose your hearing with the wind.
Oh, right, yes. Straight in off the Atlantic. The people there at the time, 100 or so, were they very different from the people you left behind in other parts of Ireland, other Gaeltachti?
Well, they were very friendly and very simple.
People often celebrate the Blasket life as being a specific thing on its own, that it is different from the mainland culture, out of which we get on Talánach and Peg and the stories.
Well, I don't know whether it's so very different, but the boys made fiddles out of tobacco boxes and things. They're very adroit with their hands, yes.
I suppose they had to be in those times. And did anything happen on the island that you remember when you were there?
Well, there was the famous Kruger, if you ever heard of him.
Can you tell us a bit about Kruger?
Well, he was just a bit of a playboy. He was talking and boasting, you know, with Peg Sayers, who was... I learned an awful lot from Peg Sayers.
So you met Peg?
Yes.
Right. And your memories of Peg, what sort of woman comes into your mind when you think of her?
She was a very vigorous person, very lively, and she was about the only person who could talk English to me, you see. Moira had a bit, and Peg. Nobody else talked English at all. Though they could read English. You see, you used to find that in those days in the Gaeltacht, people over 50 could read English but couldn't speak it. And they could speak Irish but couldn't read it.
Can you explain?
Well, you see, the change didn't come. They didn't start teaching Irish in the schools.
Until quite late on.
Yeah, and the trouble was, you see, they tried to get them the teachers by sort of short courses, but they didn't know Irish properly at all.
So would this be, Peg would have been able to greet strangers in English?
Oh yes.
Is this one of the reasons why Peg and perhaps not Moira is more famous?
Yes.
That she had the English and was able to meet people. Okay. Right. There wasn't, whilst you were there, the work that was carried on the island, there was a lot of fishing.
Yeah.
It was mostly fishing, I think. Is that how people
Fishing,
made their
yes.
living? Right. Did you go fishing with the men?
No, I was afraid.
Right. Did they have any particular crafts that you remember? Like on Arran, they had the pamputi. They make their own pamputis. They had their own.
Yes, they could make anything practically.
Really. Anything.
Weaving and so on.
Right. Good. Okay. You have a long list of academic achievements from translations of the New Testament and the Psalms from the Greek into Irish, to such works as Cuirte van Ihe and Ging de Leon a Sculchis Leon on Spanish. What, in your opinion, is your greatest work?
I don't know. I did a metrical version of the Psalms, which I've got somewhere away, but it'll never be published now, I'm afraid. Only a little of it has come out.
Right. And that you consider is your
It's about my best. And well, New Testament, you know, from Greek into Irish, it's pretty good, I think.
And perhaps maybe moving on, you could tell us a bit about your time on Inishowen.
Yeah. There's just one point I would like to make. It's we go to places because they're different, and we ought to preserve. I mean, languages and so on. We ought to preserve our differences and be proud of them, because it's the difference which makes you interesting to other people. And nowadays, with the Americanism and all the nonsense, they're trying to cut out the differences, which I think is a complete madness. You see what I mean?
Why do you think? Is it not better that we all speak the same language, read the same books, have the same culture?
No.
Because then we can speak to each other.
Well, I mean, but we're not worth meeting with each other unless we're different from each other. Can't learn anything.
But people would say that we are different anyway. I mean, you are you and I am me.
No, I don't think so. I think there's the difference, the sort of natural difference, which is, I think, the important thing.
Right. Okay. You were talking about preserving things. People might say that the language on which you spent a lot of your time is becoming less and less useful, less and less usable in cultural terms and in real terms. Would you have a reply to that?
I don't think so. Actually, it has developed a lot.
Really?
I mean, we find nowadays there's a lot of poetry being written in Irish by people who, and that sort of thing.
So it still has a value, cultural value anyway. Okay. Your memories of Tory?
Yeah, Tory Island.
Yeah. They spoke Irish in Tory?
Oh yes, nothing but Irish.
Really? Really?
Well, the lighthouse, of course, the lighthouse wouldn't, but I had the dog, and I used to be frightened, you see, that he'd go down the cliffs after rabbits. But Tory Island, it's a terribly heavy climate. I more or less lived on mushrooms.
Really?
There are a lot of mushrooms.
Really? This is because of the dampness.
Yeah.
The dampness of the climate.
And then there was a very cunning fellow, Paddy. He's known as Paddy, and he was, someone said that he'd managed to do a Jew, and therefore he was regarded as over clever.
I see. And you got to know Paddy quite well.
Yes, I lent him 30 shillings, which I have never seen since.
Now you know where he got his name, perhaps. Yeah, which is maybe a bit unfair.
He took some man to Hoth, and he sold him. I think he sold him all the nets that were around the place.
And was gone before anybody
Yes.
found out. Clever man. Was there much contact between Inishowen and Tory? Do you see similarities there?
Oh no, none at all.
None at all. Okay. And did you take many notes when you were on Tory and in Inishowen?
I took a good deal of songs and bits and pieces.
Were you particularly concentrating on songs and poetry, or were you looking just general?
General, but songs especially.
Right. Tory people have a name for singing, I think. They have a very strong singing tradition.
Yeah.
Do you remember any particular songs that you got on Tory? The
Oh,
names
yes.
of them?
Yes, I mean, there's a poem I heard, Struine when me a larhan chil, agus me a ve ard vanna hore, agus me a ve a geistach le gu na nian, agus a year nach evil, dun she ato and dore. She's happy for whoever is in Tory.
Yeah. Great love for his island, the writer there. Moving on to Trinity, you worked in TCD for many years as Professor of Biblical Greek. What are your memories of TCD at this time?
Well, at that time, of course, it wasn't closed up in the way it is now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I could, could get around Dublin on a bicycle, that sort of thing, and get from, and you could go in and out of Trinity, of course.
And your work at the time, what did your work involve as Professor of Biblical Greek?
Well, I had to take exams, which sometimes came in winter and frost, which was very difficult getting there. My wife used to drive me. She was a very good driver. Still is, for that matter.
Right. And you, as professor, you were teaching as well?
I was trying to teach. Now, the silly thing was, my previous professor of Biblical Greek was R.M. Gwyn, who was very deaf, but he was a great scholar. And he used to deal with the Old Testament translations. And I found when I came along that there were no students who really knew any Greek worth speaking of.
Right.
They hadn't learned it properly, they'd just done a crash course. And I had to take them in for BD practically and make them up a bit.
Right. So you actually taught Greek language from scratch?
Yeah.
Right. That must have had its share of joys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was in Columba's, I had a couple of boys who were learning Greek.
Ah.
And they were good and really learned it thoroughly, but when I got to Trinity, it was all gone to the dogs.
Right. Okay. One might describe you as a Republican with a small R, but your father was a member of the Orange Order, as you were telling us. How did he view your attitudes? Were there any conflicts?
Oh, very mild. He sort of more or less, there was one famous time when he said, did ever you hear of the Bridge of Portadown? In 1641, he said, they pushed the Protestants in with pikes and you could have walked over the river of the dead bodies. And I said, I happen to know my history, and I said, well, Father, do you know who led the men that pushed them in? One of them was Neil Quin, and the other was Tool McCann. Well, Tool McCann was a friend of mine we had a primate at that time, or bishop who was McCann. So that was rather knocked him flat. I mean, it shows you how history always goes funny ways.
Yes, indeed. So there was an agreement to differ, perhaps, between...
We agreed to differ, but... and Father, I remember he was not so well, and he had the Greek Testament by his bedside. He always read his Greek Testament. He knew it very well.
Really?
And I said, will you read that, a bit of it? And he read it out aloud. Well, his pronunciation is a bit different, but I walked around the room and gradually managed to catch when he read it. We used to work that way quite a lot.
That he would read
He'd read the Greek aloud, and I'd listen and catch the meaning.
So this was after you knew Greek at this time?
Yes.
Right, so you were a little bit older. Okay.
I was at Trinity at that time, yeah.
Right, okay. And you didn't ever do much travelling abroad. And then when you were 75, you suddenly took off to Europe.
Well, that's the see, I was tied up with parishes and things. And I couldn't get round.
Right,
And
right.
then when we got free, we were able to get about a bit.
Right, right. Where did you go?
All over the place. We got to Greece.
Great.
Well, my sisters-in-law used to travel a lot, you see, and we used to take us with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So you were in Greece? That must have been...
Holy Land,
Mm-hmm.
Greece, where else? Sorry.
Cyprus.
Cyprus, yes.
Malta,
Cyprus,
Paris.
yes, and Malta.
France.
Malta, of course, was weird because they have a sort of Arabic
Yes.
written in phonetics.
Really?
That's what the language they speak in Malta.
It's Arab
Maltese.
influence.
It's Lebanese Arabic.
Right, right. With Roman lettering.
Yes.
I never knew that. Did you, as you were travelling around, did you come to any new understanding about the Greeks, that the Greek that you had learnt, or?
I got moderate. I could get along a bit in modern Greek.
Really?
It's very like Irish in its pronunciation, you see.
Right. Right. So the words and sounds were not too. The sounds weren't too difficult.
Not so difficult.
Right. Okay. What do you think of the Greeks?
Greeks?
Yeah, the Greek people.
Oh, very nice. Well, the country Greeks are the most hospitable and kindly people you could possibly meet. Of course, the town ones are more difficult. But
So there's any similarities between the Greeks and the Blasket Islanders?
yes, well, there's similar friendliness and hospitality and so on.
Good. Could you tell us something about Grey Boy?
Well, he had about 40 words. I trained him till he was about 13, and then we were moving, and so I had to get him put away because he couldn't have survived.
You're getting old.
Yeah,
I have to say that Grey Boy is a dog, in fact.
yeah.
Yes, the people listening to this won't have known that. And he was the dog that you had in the college, was he?
Yes, he was here. Yes, he was very popular. He used to shut the door, I'd tell him to shut the door. I'd tell him to get up and sit down and so on.
Great fun for the boys, I imagine, at the time. You must have met many interesting people in your life. Whom have you admired and why?
In many ways, one person I admire very greatly is Mrs. Mercy Sims, the widow of the primate.
George.
She never drove a car. She always rode a bicycle.
Really?
And her grandfather was Smith O'Brien,
Oh, really?
the rebel.
Really?
Her great-grandfather.
Right. Smith O'Brien was sent to Australia, am I right?
Yes.
At one stage. So mhm.
Then he escaped.
And came back here, I think, was that?
Yes.
Right. And she was his great-granddaughter?
Something like that, yes.
Right, okay. And so she could have driven a car, but she chose not to.
Yeah.
So it was her simplicity that you found
Partly that, yes.
attractive. And was there anything else that she added to your life that you can maybe tell us about?
Well, I always admired her greatly, Mercy Sims.
on a personal level.
Simplicity and complete naturalness and a complete lack of side, you know.
Right, right.
Although she was, well, she was a descendant of Brian Boru.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
she was.
Really, really. She was conscious of that.
I suppose so. But she certainly was a genuine O'Brien.
Right. Is there a connection between the Quins and the O'Briens? Would I be right in saying that?
No,
No?
not that I know of.
Right. I thought there was some connection down in Clare. Maybe it's Incha Quin I'm thinking of.
No, Incha Quin was, I don't know, there wasn't any that I know of.
Okay, right, okay. You are first and foremost a scholar of language. Have you any personal view about language and culture?
Well, as I said, it's the valuable differences that make us interesting to each other. Now, I have great admiration for Christopher McGimpsey in the north.
Really?
I mean, he's a unionist, and he's very strong in favour of development of Irish. That every Irishman ought to know Irish.
Right. He's coming from politically, obviously, different shade to most people in the south, but it's from the cultural point of view.
Yes.
You mean?
And well, if you go back to about 1860, you see, Protestants knew it as well as the Roman Catholics and were very interested. And of course, there was the Harp Festival and all that.
In Belfast.
And then there are traditions of '98, which are very muddled.
Right, right, right. And then the waters got muddied somehow. The waters got muddied.
Very mixed up, yes.
Yes, yes. Mostly political?
Yes.
Mm.
But I mean, I go to Saintfield, and in Saintfield there was a terrific battle in '98, and most of the rebels were Protestants, and most of the royal troops were Monaghan militia, Roman Catholics.
Yes, yes. Very strange turn of events. And, right, okay. Would you consider yourself optimistic or pessimistic about mankind's future?
Well, I can't see how mankind can last much longer. I think they'll blow themselves up or something. I think the only hope is in God.
Something other than ourselves, anyway. Right. And are you content with your life?
No, very far from it.
Really?
But
Would you change anything?
well, I'm sorry I didn't learn more Portuguese, because Portuguese is the language of it's the the language of the people who explored.
Yes. Brazil, I think, is it?
Yeah, but not only Brazil, but the East,
Yes, right.
Malabar and all that.
Right. That is something you would change.
The most interesting poem there is the poems that were done by the explorers themselves
Right. I've never come across those.
in Malabar, yeah. Oh, they're very, very remarkable.
So you've just finished another work from Spanish to Irish?
Well, I did just, yes.
So you're a very busy man. What's next on the drawing board?
Well, I've just done one from Greek into Ecclesiastes into Irish. and I don't know whether I'll be able to get it published or what to do with it.
So that brings us back to the beginnings of a very long career in language. Did you ever think about where your love of language came from? Was it from a teacher, or from a person, or from an event, or just?
I don't know, just from circumstances, I suppose.
Well, one way or the other, I think we have an awful lot to be grateful for. And Canon Cosslett Quin, I'd like to thank you very much for coming out on this very cold November day and subjecting yourself to the rigours of an interview in your old school, St. Columba's. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.